All right, hello and good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this month's NCCOR Connect and Explore webinar. Our topic today is sleep's role in child health, expanding NCCOR's catalog of surveillance systems, also known as the CSS. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be getting to today's presentation. And after that, there will be a chance for Q&A for members of our audience. And then we'll close out with a few quick announcements. Let me go ahead and do some introductions first before we get underway. My name is Karen Hilliard, and I'm with the NCCOR Coordinating Center, and I will be your facilitator for today. And now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have with us today Dr. Alfonso Alfini, and he is the Program Director at the National Center on Sleep Disorders Research in the Division of Lung Diseases at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. He oversees a research portfolio that supports research on the genetic predisposition, risk factors, pathogenesis, epidemiology, diagnosis, and treatment of sleep and circadian rhythm sleep-wake disorders. He's interested in the role of lifestyle factors, particularly diet, physical activity, and sleep in cardiometabolic and neurocognitive health. And Dr. Alfini holds a doctoral degree in kinesiology and cognitive neuroscience from the University of Maryland, a master's degree in exercise science from the George Washington University, and a bachelor's degree in human performance and wellness K-12 education from Colorado Mesa University. He completed his postdoctoral training in aging and dementia at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and served on the faculty there in the Department of Neurology before joining the NIH. And we also have today Dr. Marissa Shams-White, and she is a program director at the National Cancer Institute in the Risk Factor Assessment Branch of the Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences. In this role, she supports research in dietary patterns, measures for diet and sleep assessment, the emerging areas of systems science, and the measurement of 24-hour behavior patterns, including diet, sleep, and physical activity, as well as obesity policy research. Dr. Shams-White received a PhD and MS in nutritional epidemiology from the Tufts University Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy, and an MPH from the Tufts University School of Medicine, as well as an MS in traditional Oriental medicine from Pacific College of Oriental Medicine. In addition, she completed her postdoctoral training as a cancer prevention fellow at the National Cancer Institute. Before we get into today's discussion, I want to just announce a couple of housekeeping notes. If at any point you need technical assistance with the webinar, please let us know using the chat box. And if you're having any trouble logging into the webinar at any point, you can email us at ncor@fhi360.org, and we'll work with you to resolve the problem. I also want to note that if you have a question for our speakers, you can ask it at any point during the webinar, but we would ask that you use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So not the chat, but the Q&A box, and put your questions in there either during the presentations or during the Q&A period after the presentations. I also want everybody to know that we're going to be tweeting today's webinar from the NCCOR Twitter platform. And if you'd like to join the conversation, you can use the hashtag ConnectExplore. And now, it's always helpful to our speakers to know who is in the audience. So we actually have a couple of questions for all of you before we get started. And the first question today, and you can answer right on the screen, is what age groups do you work with? And you can select all that apply. And so there was, hopefully everybody is seeing the poll question now. And the responses are the various age groups from infants to toddlers, adolescents, adults, and older adults. And please check all that apply, who are the age groups that you work with. And we'll have a second question in just a moment about what your role is. We'll give folks just a moment to answer. I see a few folks still responding here, and we'll just count down. If you haven't responded yet, please go ahead and make your choices, and we'll end this poll question in 3, 2. I was about to count down, but I still see other people answering. 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. And then going on to the second question, how would you classify your role in the context of assessing sleep health? And again, please pick all that apply. Are you a researcher? Do you do federal program management? Are you a clinician or registered dietitian or nutritionist? Are you in public policy? Are you a student? Is this just a general interest area for you, or maybe something else? So go ahead and respond to that question. We'll give folks just a moment to answer. And again, pick all of the things that apply to you. All right. 3, 2, 1. We'll go ahead and end this poll. All right, and I actually skipped over the results for poll 1, but I can let me go ahead and share for poll question 2. If you were wondering who else is in the audience, it looks like a lot of folks in the research and or clinician / registered dietitian or nutritionist categories. And then we also have a good representation of folks in federal program management, public policy, and then a lot of people who chose general interest or other. And in fact, if you've got something in the other category that is an important thing that we should be aware of, please go ahead and put that in the chat, because we would love to know something more about your background and what brought you here today. And then also going back to poll question number 1, I'm just going to quickly pop up the results of that so we can see those, and hopefully everybody can see that screen. And as you can see, we have quite a even distribution across a number of different age groups here, although the greatest number of people working with adolescents, and possibly with some of those other age groups as well, since it was a pick all that apply to you category. So this is great. It's very nice to know who's in the audience, and we hope that all of you, no matter what your role is or what age group you work with, will find something important today from today's webinar. So now with that, we are going to go ahead and move on to our speakers and on to today's spotlight: sleep's role in child health, expanding NCCOR's catalog of surveillance systems. And I'm going to hand things off to Dr. Alfini.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alfonso Alfini, and I'll be speaking during the first half of this presentation. So before we get started, I want to thank the NCCOR organizers for putting this webinar together and inviting myself and Dr. Shams White to speak on this very important and exciting topic. It's an honor to be here with you, and that we hope that this presentation is both helpful and informative as you consider that sleep matters in the context of child health and obesity. We also hope that you may be inspired to use these data to examine links between sleep and obesity in your own work. Next slide, please. So this is a broad overview of the topics we're going to talk about today. To kick things off, I'm going to start with a short update on pediatric obesity, trends and risk factors. I'll transition into the connection between sleep and various health outcomes, including some potential pathways by which sleep may contribute to obesity risk. I'll then present a very basic primer on sleep and circadian rhythms, and we'll wrap up the background section by highlighting some relevant research gaps and opportunities within this space. From here, I'll turn it over to Dr. Shams White, who will describe how NCCOR has expanded the catalog of surveillance systems to include a number of really important sleep variables that can be used in your own analyses. Next slide. So childhood overweight and obesity are highly prevalent in the US, and there's evidence indicating that it tracks into adulthood. In this figure, the x-axis shows 4 different weight categories for children starting at age 7, and the y-axis shows the percentage of weight distribution as an adult. In this first figure here on the left, we see children who started in a low to normal weight category. The blue band represents the percentage of children who maintained a normal weight into adulthood. The yellow band represents the percentage of those with overweight, and the red band represents the percentage of those with obesity. As you can see, as we progress through these categories, through these bars, the greater a child's body weight was at age 7, the higher the likelihood that they'd reach adulthood with overweight or obesity. Next slide. The figure here further emphasizes this point, showing that overweight obesity in childhood is the leading risk factor for obesity in adulthood. If you look carefully at the x-axis, you can see that the relative risk of obesity in adulthood when overweight or obesity was present during childhood ranges from 3 to 11 and doesn't include 1. Next slide. And finally, this graph shows NHANES data from 2011 through 2020. The y-axis shows the percentage of children found with obesity at each time point. Orange dots represent girls and turquoise dots represent boys. What I want to draw your attention to here is the emerging evidence that obesity rates worsened during the pandemic. Additionally, as you can see over here on the right, there are well-documented differences in obesity by race, as well as evidence that children with disability and those who live in more rural geographic areas are at an increased risk. These risk factors, coupled with persistent differences by race and strong associations with a wide range of chronic diseases, underscore childhood obesity as an emerging but significant public health problem. Next slide. So like obesity, sleep deficiency is also an emerging epidemic in the US, affecting individuals and subpopulations, including children, in different ways. While a single purpose for sleep remains elusive, research over the last several decades, mostly in adults, has demonstrated that sleep serves numerous functions, including tissue growth and repair, energy restoration, and even brain waste removal. Similarly, although more work is needed, findings suggest that sleep plays a vital role throughout childhood health and development, including in things like mental health and emotion regulation, immune function, metabolic health, injury prevention, and academic performance. Next slide. This figure shows several hypothetical pathways by which short sleep duration may increase obesity risk for caregivers and their children. So starting at the top of this green circle here and following the arrows to the left, sleep restriction in the form of inadequate sleep during a single night or accumulated sleep debt across several days may lead to metabolic alterations, resulting in appetite dysregulation, changes in hunger and satiety, and altered food preferences and timing. Similarly, on the other side of this circle is another potential pathway by which short sleep may increase daytime sleepiness and fatigue, impairing processes like mood, attention, motivation, and judgment. These sleep-related impairments, in addition to an increased opportunity to eat, could lead to and possibly exacerbate changes in eating behavior. If you follow the blue path, sleepiness and fatigue would likely reduce levels of physical activity, thereby decreasing energy expenditure. Whereas if you follow the red path, you can see that this would elevate energy intake, resulting in a positive caloric balance and increased BMI. Next slide. In 2017, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded for discoveries of molecular mechanisms controlling circadian rhythms, which really brought the fields of sleep and circadian biology to the forefront of public awareness and highlighting their critical importance in the health and well-being of society. Without getting too deep into the weeds, these Nobel laureates isolated a gene that controls normal daily biological rhythms, demonstrating that a gene encodes a protein that accumulates in the cell during the night and is degraded during the day. Since this initial breakthrough, far more has been discovered about biological clocks and the machinery that controls them in both humans and other organisms. Next slide. Sleep is essential, not only for humans, but virtually all animal species, including mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and insects. All of them sleep in some form or another. Next slide. As humans, we spend a tremendous amount of time sleeping. In fact, it's about 1/3 of our lives, meaning that if we live to be 100 years old, we will have spent 33 of those years asleep. Such a significant amount of time spent sleeping suggests that sleep must play an absolutely essential role in our existence. Next slide. So while we should spend a third of our lives asleep, our wake time often takes precedence, and sleep is the first thing, unfortunately, that gets sacrificed. This results in sleep deficiency and circadian misalignment that not only threatens our own health, but also the health of those we care for, including our children. Next slide. Okay, so the figure on the left shows a typical hypnogram for a healthy adult. You can see that sleep is comprised of sleep cycles that repeat across the night. The x-axis represents hours of sleep during the night, and the y-axis represents the two main types of sleep: rapid eye movement sleep, or REM sleep, also known as dream sleep, and non-rapid eye movement sleep, or non-REM sleep, which can further be divided into light and deep sleep, also known as slow wave sleep. During non-REM sleep, heart rate, breathing rate, and blood pressure all decrease, and the brain shows signs of slow synchronized activity. During REM sleep, however, heart rate, breathing, and blood pressure all increase, and the brain shows signs of fast, desynchronized activity. In adults, these two types of sleep repeat on average in 90-minute cycles across the night, always moving progressively down through non-REM and back up to REM, with higher amounts of non-REM in the first half of the night and higher amounts of REM concentrated in the second half of the night. Over here on the right are typical hypnograms for an infant, child, and adolescent. For infants, sleep onset starts with REM sleep, and sleep cycles last an average of 50 to 60 minutes. And while sleep cycles include REM and non-REM, more than half the night is spent in REM sleep. As children get older, sleep onset switches to start with non-REM sleep, and the proportion of deep slow wave sleep increases. As childhood progresses, both REM and slow wave sleep decrease, making way for light non-REM sleep that's mostly seen in adults. Children and adolescents obtain more REM and slow wave sleep than adults do, which likely reflects the rapid growth and development during these periods. But overall, sleep patterns begin to resemble those of adults as kids grow older. Next slide. So the need to sleep in part is driven by something called sleep pressure. So this figure on the left shows the homeostatic sleep drive. The x-axis represents time across the 24-hour period, and the y-axis represents sleep pressure. The longer a person remains awake, the more a chemical substance called adenosine builds up in the brain, making us feel sleepy. When we sleep, and specifically during deep non-REM sleep, this chemical is cleared from the brain, so that by the time we wake up in the morning, the drive to sleep has dissipated. Next slide. Another critical factor that helps determine our sleep-wake cycle are circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms are internally derived biological rhythms that cycle over a 24-hour period and control the physiological processes of every cell and organ in our body. They are controlled by the brain's master clock, which is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This small cluster of brain cells uses light entering through the eye and other external factors to help keep time throughout the body. However, these rhythms will continue to cycle even without external cues. On average, circadian rhythms in humans are slightly longer than 24 hours, which is where the Latin term circadian comes from, circa meaning approximately and dien meaning 1 day. Next slide. So if you focus over here on the left, sleep itself changes across the lifespan. And it's not just sleep duration, but sleep quality also changes. In this picture, age is on the x-axis and time in minutes is on the y. Each color layered on the graph represents a different aspect of sleep. Of note are the significant increases in sleep duration in blue and the significant decreases in REM shown in red and deep non-REM sleep shown in green. Additionally, sleep duration often wanes with age. Even though the required amount of overall sleep duration remains the same across adulthood. While this is interesting, what's often not discussed and is not entirely shown on this graph is that the recommended amount of sleep for healthy children across childhood changes, with infants requiring between 12 and 16 hours a day, toddlers and young children requiring between 9 and 14 hours, and adolescents requiring between 8 and 10 hours per night. Next slide. Circadian rhythms also change across the lifespan. In this figure, the x-axis represents time across the 24-hour period, and the y-axis represents the rhythm height of 3 circadian processes in adults. The dark blue line is core body temperature. The light blue line is the hormone melatonin, which helps synchronize the sleep-wake cycle and facilitates transition to sleep. And the red line is the hormone cortisol, which helps liberate glucose for energy and plays an important role in stress response. The shaded area is the time spent sleeping. Among adults, you can see a drop in body temperature and cortisol and a rise in melatonin just before sleep. These three circadian changes help to initiate and maintain sleep across the night. Over here on the right, you can see these same circadian processes for an infant, child, and adolescent. During infancy, sleep-wake rhythms are ultradian, meaning that they occur multiple times per day, and consolidate during the first year of development. Temperature rhythms peak during childhood, and amplitude steadily declines with age. Both melatonin and cortisol peak in childhood and similarly decline in amplitude with age. And as children transition to adolescence, you can see a delay in melatonin and a marked shift from early to late chronotype, or having a preference for later sleep at night. Next slide. Although circadian rhythms naturally occur inside of our bodies, they are also highly influenced by the outside world. The strongest of these influencing factors is the Earth's light-dark cycle, which tells the brain when it's daytime and when it's nighttime. The timing of when we eat, when we exercise, and when we sleep are also powerful factors that tell the body when to release specific hormones, including those involved in digestion and growth. Some behaviors like physical activity and exercise alter heart rate, breathing, and body temperature independently, which prompt the release of various hormones by themselves. Other factors, including when we socialize, go to school, and travel across time zones, can also have a significant impact on circadian rhythms. Next slide. So in 2014, sleep health was defined as a multi-dimensional construct, including the dimensions of sleep satisfaction, alertness during waking hours, sleep timing, sleep efficiency, sleep duration, and sleep regularity. While these dimensions are likely applicable for pediatric sleep, there are some differences that should be considered. In 2021, an update for multidimensional sleep health was published for pediatrics that highlights these differences. For example, children may not be able to reliably report on their sleep satisfaction, and parent perceptions of their sleep may be influenced by their own mood or view of the child. Depending on the child's age, alertness may also be difficult to assess, as many children nap during the day, and there are likely cultural differences determining the age by which a child stops napping. In the case of sleep timing, a child's bed and wake-up time are likely determined by the parents' work schedules and school start times. Sleep efficiency is also difficult to assess, as frequent night awakenings are developmentally appropriate for infants, and because children may not be able to report on how long they slept while they were in bed. And changes in sleep duration, as we talked about earlier, occur across childhood and will vary by age and other family factors. But perhaps the greatest difference in these dimensions between children and adults is sleep regularity, which is both highly relevant for children and has the potential to either undermine or optimize their sleep health. Yet for children, this dimension also depends on sleep-related behaviors that are largely out of their control. Such behaviors might include things like sleep schedule, bedtime routine, consistency, sleep onset associations, parent-child interactions at bedtime, even things like caffeine consumption and the use of electronic devices at bedtime or throughout the night. Next slide, please. Within a socio-ecological framework, factors at different levels of the social ecology, including characteristics of the individual child, or the microsystem, the family and school environments, or the mesosystem, and the broader neighborhood and sociocultural context, or the macrosystem, may independently or interactively contribute to aspects of pediatric sleep health. Individual factors, such as health status, and family factors, including parenting behaviors, may be more immediate factors that influence a child's sleep, compared to more distant things like environmental green space, light, and noise. Nonetheless, factors at multiple levels likely interact in complex ways to influence pediatric sleep over time. For instance, living in a disadvantaged neighborhood or being of lower socioeconomic status have both been linked with poor sleep among children. But these factors can be transient and may change across development. For example, a difficult temperament or medical condition like reflux in infancy may contribute to challenging interactions with parents around sleep in early childhood, but would be less likely to be a concern in toddlers or adolescents. On the other hand, a later school start time could directly improve sleep duration for adolescents with virtually no impact on infants or toddlers. While more research is needed, it's possible that the consequences of insufficient sleep, such as emotion dysregulation, could impact how children interact with their social environment, including their parents, teachers, and friends, which could potentially have long-term consequences. Next slide. So as a program director at the National Center on Sleep Disorders Research, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the 2021 NIH Sleep Research Plan. This plan highlights several priority areas relevant to pediatric sleep health, including goals to improve the treatment of sleep and circadian disorders, develop tools and methods for the early detection and treatment of sleep deficiency and sleep and circadian disorders in children and adolescents, and to develop personalized approaches moving towards treatment for all. As we've discussed, there is evidence indicating that poor sleep and altered circadian rhythms are linked to numerous health outcomes across childhood, which has tremendous public health relevance and highlights the potential of sleep and circadian rhythms as therapeutic targets. Additional high-level priorities for research in pediatric sleep might include things like identifying both behavioral and biological markers to better understand how sleep and circadian rhythms change across childhood, and how such changes may be leveraged to improve health and developmental trajectories. Another area of interest is expanding our understanding of chronotherapy and circadian pharmacokinetics, as appropriately timed medication and vaccines are likely much more important than we currently understand. And importantly, conducting research that specifically targets social determinants of health and socioeconomic factors to promote the expansion of high-quality education on sleep hygiene and to improve community development strategies for the improvement of sleep at each level of the socio-ecological framework. Next slide. So the last thing I want to mention here is that in 2020, an NIH workshop report was published that defined the term sleep health disparity as a difference in one or more dimensions of sleep health on a consistent basis that adversely affects designated disadvantaged populations. This definition helps clarify a need for more robust investigations of the underlying mechanisms and pathways that account for disparities seen in these populations. Gaining more advanced knowledge of these concepts is critically important because the demographics of this country are changing. The racial diversity of the nation's pediatric population is well established and documented and is expanding across the country. In 2019, children of color constituted more than half of the pediatric population in 15 states, and more than 2/5 of the pediatric population in another 11 states. The increasing number of children of color is a critical element of the changing demographics of America's pediatric population. So it's important that as we conduct research, we consider the growing diversity of the US population. So to reiterate, sleep is a biological imperative that's governed largely by our own biology and behavior, but social and societal factors have a huge impact on sleep health. Sleep deficiency is an epidemic in the US, and much of the variability present in the population affects individuals and subpopulations, including children, in different ways, which can lead to negative health outcomes for different groups that can create health disparities. And with that, I want to turn things over to my colleague, Dr. Shams White.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alfini, for that wonderful overview. And I want to echo your words. Thank you again to NCCOR for having us today. I'm thrilled to be here to share some updates. And I will continue this presentation, diving a bit more into NCCOR now and our updates to the catalog of surveillance systems. Next slide. So I just want to highlight as a reminder that NCCOR is a public-private partnership of 4 leading research vendors, so the NIH, CDC, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and USDA. And these areas that Dr. Alfini mentioned regarding sleep and child health really cross-cut interests in childhood obesity research of our organizations. And these research areas and gaps and opportunities in the sleep space that Dr. Alfini shared align with NCCOR's mission to accelerate progress in reducing childhood obesity for all children in the US, with attention to high-risk populations and communities. And NCCOR focuses on efforts with potential benefit to children, teens, and their families, as well as the communities in which they live. Next slide. And shown here are NCCOR's goals, and I'm going to focus in on the second and third goals shown here. So one of NCCOR's goals is to support researchers and practitioners by providing tools that help build capacity for childhood obesity research and to improve it, to increase and improve surveillance as well. Next slide. And so 7 tools have been developed over the past decade by NCCOR focused on measurement, evaluation, on research translation, and dissemination. And more information is available on NCCOR's site for each of these tools. But today I'd like to focus on one of NCCOR's first tools created, the Catalog of Surveillance Systems. Next. Oh, sorry, can you go back one slide? I think I lost an animation. Thank you. So yeah, it's one of the first ones you can see that was developed in 2011. And I want to highlight sleep-specific information that may be of interest to attendees today, and which I think is a strong example of what NCCOR can contribute to the research community. Next slide. So the Catalog of Surveillance Systems, which I'll call CSS for short, was a tool NCCOR created, as I mentioned, in 2011 to help improve data access. So it currently provides one-stop access to 114 publicly available data sets relevant to childhood obesity research, including information on national, state, and local data resources. And researchers can access data related to environmental and policy factors, health behaviors, outcomes, and determinants of obesity. And it also has this function to help review, sort, and compare different data sets. And it also encourages data linkage across multiple levels. And I believe, yes, the link was currently just shared right now in the chat if you'd like to explore it further. Next slide. So listed here are the inclusion criteria for any data sets in CSS. So data need to be relevant to childhood obesity and relevant to one or more levels within the ecological model, meaning individual, home or family, community or organization, or the macro level type data. This focuses on domestic data sets, so conducted in the US, not international data, and the data has to be publicly available. It also includes one-time cross-sectional studies as well as ongoing surveillance systems, and the data need to include recent data collected in the last decade. So as an example, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, or NHANES for short, is a data set that goes back decades, but it still continues to collect data, and so therefore it's included in CSS. Next slide. And shown here are some snapshots from before our recent update. Next. And you can see on the left from the top down in very small fonts that it allows users to search and filter the data sets by level, scope, key variables, by age group, racial and ethnic groups, by design, and by cost. You can select these filters to help reduce the 114 to those that contain the data you're interested in. And under key variables there in the middle, you can see, again, in very small font, that users could sort by a few key variables. So by diet related, physical activity related, weight related, and those with geocode or linkage. And if you select diet related, you'll see as shown here on the right that 86 of the data sets are listed that include diet related variables. Next. So let's pick an example from here, the FLASHY study, as indicated in the red box. Next. You can see here, it'll take you to this great summary information. I'm starting with the at a glance tab. As you can see across the top, there's various tabs, but this tab gives you information generally about the study and some noteworthy characteristics. And there's several additional tabs that provide further information. Next. And if you clicked on this third key variable tab, next, you will see for each study, the key variables are summarized. And again, in this example, we selected the diet-related filter. Next. So you'll see diet-related variables are listed here in the study, as well as information for any of the other variable filter options. Next. Now, in addition to diet and physical activity, sleep, as Dr. Alfini really nicely gave a great overview on, is an important modifiable risk factor of interest. And as he shared, a growing body of evidence suggests that poor sleep health is associated with risk for childhood obesity, but we really need more research in this space. It's also important to consider the context of a 24-hour day, as he highlighted, and this complex interplay between what we eat, physical activity, and how much and where we sleep, and how they may together impact the risk for obesity. And it could be challenging to identify resources where researchers can look at data that capture all three to help address their research questions. So to support researchers and public health practitioners interested in studying sleep to advance progress on sleep and childhood obesity, as well as these behaviors together, we've updated CSS to now have a sleep-related key variable filter. Next slide. So our working group, with guidance from a sleep expert panel, developed categories for the sleep data as shown here. So you can see that CSS includes categories that capture the sleep environments, including physical and social sleep environments, as well as the schedule-related sleep environment. It also captures sleep duration and quantity and quality, sleep disorders, and more, including information if they're in the data set on, for example, sleep-related policies. And of the 114 data sets in CSS, we found that 36 include sleep-related data currently, and over a dozen, I'll quickly note, had diet, physical activity, and sleep-related data. Next slide. So now if you visit the webpage, this is what you'll see. And I see the link was added to the chat if you want to look further at CSS again and at an example. But you'll see under key variables, there are these filter options, and now sleep is there as well. And as you see on the right, when you select it, 36 data sets will be filtered out that you could look at. And on the far right, you can see that there's actually an option to select multiple data sets to then compare. So let's briefly revisit the Flashy study. Next. Go one more time. Sorry, too many animations on my part. So now if you click on the Flashy study, you'll see that it's updated. I'm going to show this through a few snapshots, but again, if you visit the website, you can scroll down. So again, if you go to the key variables tab, and you scroll down after diet and physical activity related variables, next, you'll see that sleep variables are now listed. And you'll see the left column is the categories I previously mentioned with a bit more detail, as well as the method of assessment on the right. So for example, here you can see that questionnaires were used to capture the information for Flashy. And again, all these variables are very generally categorized. We wanted users to get a sense of what's in the data set, but you will need to visit the specific study site to learn more about the data and variables. But again, the strength of CSS is to allow researchers to quickly and easily get a sense of what data sets could have the data they're looking for in a quick and easy way. Next. And now that CS is updated, we're very excited to be promoting it. We want to share this sleep update with the community. We've launched this updated version that you can now visit and have started conducting broader outreach and promotion. You can see on the right, if you visit the website, we have some updated social media graphics and a fact sheet that you can use. And we highlighted sleep in our NCCOR annual report and are thrilled to be holding today's webinar to be sharing this information with you. And I do want to note that we do aim to add a few new data sets into CSS this year that capture diet, physical activity, and sleep data. So we'll be sharing more in the future on that update, and we'll continue our outreach activities. Next slide. And before I end, I do want to highlight the fantastic working group on the left who helped make this happen, including Dr. Alfini. It was really so great to have their expertise and teamwork on this CSS update project. And we had wonderful support from our expert panel and colleagues at FHI 360. And I do want to give a shout out and note that extractions were led by one of our expert panel members, Dr. Selena Nguyen Rodriguez. So it was wonderful to work with her and her colleague. And with that, I will pass the virtual baton back. And thank you everyone for your time.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you to both of our speakers for a terrific presentation. And I know that we have questions from our audience. This is the time to ask those questions. You can put your question into the Q&A box, which you'll find on the Zoom toolbar. And we will get to as many questions as possible in the next few minutes. So let me go ahead and start with one question, which is, with the expansion of the CSS to include sleep variables, what opportunities do you see for collaboration between researchers, healthcare providers, and public health practitioners in addressing childhood obesity more effectively? And either one of you can jump in on that.
So I guess maybe I'll start. Fonzie, you're there as well? Okay,
Yeah,
I'll just jump in, but I'll just jump in quickly and then happy to pass the baton. So again, a strength of a CSS is to provide data for researchers if they have specific research questions in this space among children of various ages. They can visit it to see where there may be data that they could analyze to answer their questions. But it really provides an opportunity to bring together expertise in sleep as well as with diet and physical activity to ask these kind of overarching questions and gain a better understanding of how these behaviors may affect each other and interact to affect obesity and prevention and diagnosis and treatment. So I think that this provides, again, an opportunity to help further support the research in this space to help identify next steps.
Excellent. And Dr. Alfini, if you want to pop in and say anything, you can, or I can go to the next question.
Yeah, I just will add one quick thing. I think that it, like Marissa said, that this is a really tremendous opportunity to not only cross collaborate with different fields of research, but also to engage community stakeholders and to sort of help facilitate different strategies that may be, that could be useful to improve sleep and obesity outcomes.
Excellent. So we have another question. Dr. Alfini, you noted a goal to strengthen social determinants of health research to inform community efforts or interventions to improve pediatric sleep across the ecological model. Do we have existing examples of community-based pediatric sleep strategies that may be relevant to comprehensive childhood obesity prevention efforts?
Yeah, so in fact, this is one of NCSDR's priority areas. And there is there are several studies out there that are NIH supported that are trying to engage community by sort of implementing these strategies, including things like environmental strategies, by delivering participants, giving them things that they can use, perhaps in a house that has a lot of light pollution or has noise pollution. So they could deliver things like sleep masks or white noise makers or portable air conditioners to reduce the temperature in the house. Other things are sort of improved sleep hygiene education. So actually giving people the tools, the knowledge that they need to sort of get themselves ready for sleep, have a good bedtime routine, things to avoid that might keep them awake at night: caffeine, alcohol, maybe eating too late, close to bedtime. So things like that are happening right now, and the hope is that it continues to grow and grow.
Another question, are there other variables beyond sleep that emerging research suggests may also significantly influence childhood obesity? And if so, could the CSS potentially expand further to incorporate these variables?
Marissa, I'll let you take this one if you want.
Sure. Yeah, I'll take a stab at this. Diet, physical activity, and sedentary behavior and sleep are all required behaviors that we all have to do or not do throughout the day. And evidence supports more and more why we need to study and better understand how they may impact health and childhood obesity, which is why CSS focuses on these areas currently. We wanted to create a tool that would help researchers identify, again, these data sets among children and their families that would be useful in their work and for their research questions. So as we learn more about influences on childhood obesity and from the community on needs and opportunities, CSS may expand to include, as asked, other behaviors in the future, but that's why we currently focus on these. And of course, there's always potential for expansion depending on what we learn and where we see the need from the community.
Excellent. And Dr. Alfini, anything to add there?
No.
All right.
Oh, I guess, sorry, I'll add one more thing. Sorry, something I didn't say is, I think I maybe quickly said this, but I highlighted, sleep behaviors. But as Alfonso mentioned, there's many levels of the ecological model to consider, and we do capture environment. So I do want to note that with sleep and physical activity and diet, you'll notice that there are behavior questions, but again, we do capture substances that may affect those behaviors, like caffeine or medication use, as well as maybe some sleep disorders as an example, but we also capture things about the social and physical environment, and policy that may impact them. So there are other types of data included within these very specific behavior categories, if that's helpful.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I am looking at, I don't see other questions at this moment. So I'll just give a moment for anybody who has a question to be able to put it in the Q&A box. But otherwise, we will probably move on from the Q&A. And I just want to thank both of our panelists again. This has been an amazing presentation. There's so much to learn about the influence of sleep on obesity and vice versa. And you've really shed light on a lot of important issues today that will be of interest to researchers and anyone who is working in this field. So thank you again for joining us. And with that, we're going to move to just a few announcements before we close out today. So if you would like to learn more about other social and environmental influences on childhood obesity, I encourage you to check out NCCOR's latest commentary, which is published in the Journal of Childhood Obesity. And that is about how social determinants of health and structural racism impact child health. And this commentary is based on 6 in-depth interviews and a literature review that was conducted by the Gretchen Swanson Center for Nutrition. And it highlights gaps and opportunities for advancing measurement in this field. So you can access that article at NCCOR. It's ncor.org/resources-publications. And I believe that we'll be putting that link in the chat in just a moment as well. I would also encourage you, if you have not already, to sign up for the newsletter to get updates on the latest NCCOR publications, tools, resources, and also upcoming events like our webinars. You can sign up for the NCCOR newsletters at ncor.org/e-newsletter. I would also encourage anyone who is a student in our audience today, or if you know a student, to check out the Student Hub page for NCCOR, and that is ncor.org/student-hub/. Also, one last thing, if you have used any of NCCOR's tools, we would love to hear about it. So we hope that you will reach out to us at ncor@fhi360.org and let us know about any tools that you have used. We may even invite you to join us to talk about your experience in one of our future webinars. And please remember to follow us and like us if you don't already do so on social media. We are on Twitter and on Facebook. You can find us at NCCOR there. And we encourage you as well to take the post-webinar survey that's going to open up on your screen when this webinar ends. So we would love to get your feedback on today's presentations and the topic. Please do participate in that. That'll give us good information for future topics as well. And I want to say thank you again to our terrific panelists and to all of you in the audience for joining us for today's Connect and Explore webinar. Hope you have a good rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you in a future presentation coming up from NCCOR. So have a good day, and thank you for being here today.